Imagine stepping off a long-haul flight at Charles de Gaulle. In your head, France looks like the brochure. Polished luxury brands, sunlit cafe tables stretching down cobblestone streets, and a lifestyle so relaxed it feels like a rebuke to grind culture. You assume you've arrived in a rich, stable heavyweight of the global economy. That assumption doesn't survive contact with reality. Behind the postcard surface is a country quietly running out of momentum, a place where the middle class is thinning out, where the most driven young people are packing their bags, and where the state is balancing on a mountain of debt that makes other European economies look cautious by comparison. The food is still excellent, the scenery is still beautiful, but the underlying numbers are unsettling. This is the less advertised story of modern France, and here are the reasons it's far poorer than it appears. 1. The flattening of ambition. Picture a young professional starting out in France. They did what they were told was the right path. Years of intense schooling, competitive exams, a graduate degree, solid English skills, eventually a respectable job in a city like Lyon or Bordeaux. Then the first paycheck arrives. After taxes and deductions, the median monthly take-home income sits under €1,000. Half the workforce earns less than that. Meanwhile, someone working a low-skill service job without higher education earns not dramatically less thanks to an aggressively protected minimum wage. The difference between scraping by and being middle class has shrunk to a few €100. In countries like the United States, income gaps are wide and controversial. In France, the gap is so narrow it almost disappears. Economists have a word for this compression. Over decades, the wage structure has been pressed flatter and flatter. When the government raises the minimum wage to keep up with inflation, the bottom moves up. But because labor costs are already high, salaries above that level barely budge. The floor rises, the ceiling doesn't. The result is psychological as much as financial. Years of education, responsibility, and stress deliver only marginally better rewards than entry-level work. Effort stops feeling meaningful. Ambition turns optional. The system doesn't encourage people to push harder, take risks, or innovate. It quietly teaches them not to bother. Add housing costs to the equation, and the illusion collapses entirely. In Paris, a modest studio often costs more than a median salary can reasonably support. Without roommates, family help, or outside money, living in the capital becomes a mathematical impossibility. You're not building a life there, you're improvising one. 2. A country that became a showroom. Travel a few hours away from the polished heart of Paris, and you enter a very different France. Former industrial regions filled with silent factories, empty storefronts, and towns slowly draining of people. France still likes to see itself as an industrial power. Airbus, nuclear energy, high-speed rail, those symbols exist, but they are survivors of an older era, not signs of a thriving manufacturing base. Today, manufacturing makes up a surprisingly small slice of the French economy, far less than in Germany or even several neighboring countries. Over decades, policymakers embraced the idea that advanced economies no longer needed factories. Production was considered outdated. Services, consulting, tourism, and luxury branding were supposed to replace it. In one sense, the strategy worked. France became the world's most visited country. It turned itself into a global museum. But tourism doesn't replace the role of industry. When factories disappear, so do stable, well-paying jobs outside major cities. Entire communities lose their economic anchor. Schools shrink, doctors leave, local businesses shut down. That hollowing out fuels anger. The protests, the unrest, the images of burning toll booths are not random explosions of chaos. They come from places where the only jobs left are low-wage service work or logistics warehouses. While visitors buy expensive handbags in Paris, much of the country competes for whatever crumbs remain. The pandemic exposed the consequences of this model in a moment of panic. France discovered it could no longer reliably produce even basic medications. A nation that once prided itself on scientific leadership had to depend on foreign supply chains for essentials. That is what deindustrialization looks like when stress tests arrive. 3. Living on borrowed time. France's financial position rests on a fragile foundation. Unlike the United States, it cannot print its own currency. As part of the Eurozone, it depends on market confidence and external support. Public debt has climbed far beyond levels that European rules once defined as acceptable. Balanced budgets have been absent for decades. Different governments, different ideologies, same outcome. Spending consistently exceeds revenue. A huge share of national output is devoted to social protection, pensions, healthcare, benefits. The safety net is broad and generous, and morally, that's appealing. But financially, it becomes a problem when economic growth slows and demographics turn unfavorable. Interest payments on existing debt are growing fast, competing with essential public investments. Money that could fund schools, infrastructure, or innovation is increasingly used to service past obligations. The future is being asked to pay for the comfort of the present. 4. The tax mirage. France often advertises itself as a country with strong worker protections and generous public services. What's less emphasized is the cost of maintaining that system. From an employer's perspective, hiring someone is expensive. For every euro an employee eventually receives, the state claims a large share along the way through social charges and taxes. What looks like a solid salary on paper shrinks dramatically by the time it reaches a bank account. The effect ripples outward. Companies hesitate to raise pay, workers struggle to build savings, consumption weakens, growth slows. To compensate, the state raises taxes again. It becomes a feedback loop. High taxes suppress growth. Weak growth demands more revenue. The pressure increases gradually until people realize they can't breathe financially. Wealth creation, in particular, is treated with suspicion. Accumulating assets historically triggered additional taxes, regardless of income. Many high earners simply leave. The signal is clear. Success is tolerated, but only if it's heavily shared. 5. An aging promise that no longer adds up. France's pension system was designed for a very different population structure. When there were many workers and relatively few retirees, the math worked. Today, that balance is gone. The system operates on a pay-as-you-go basis. Current workers fund current retirees. As the population ages and birth rates stagnate, fewer workers support more pensioners. The gap widens every year. Attempts to raise the retirement age ignite massive resistance. For many, working longer feels like betrayal. But without reform, the numbers simply don't close. Cutting benefits is politically toxic. Delaying retirement is barely less so. The result is paralysis. Young workers understand the reality. They pay heavily into a system they suspect will never fully pay them back. It's a quiet transfer of wealth across generations, and it weighs down the working population. 6. Talent that won't stay. France produces highly skilled people. Engineers, researchers, financiers. Its elite education tracks are world-class.
But the country struggles to keep that talent. High taxes, limited career mobility, and rigid hierarchies push ambitious individuals abroad. In global tech firms, research labs, and financial centers, French names are everywhere, just not always in France. For someone at the top of their field, the choice is straightforward. Stay and accept lower pay, slower advancement, and high costs, or leave and unlock opportunities immediately. Millions have chosen the latter. The irony is sharp. French taxpayers fund education. Other countries capture the returns. Innovation follows people, and when they leave, so does momentum. Services under strain. For years, the implicit bargain was simple: high taxes in exchange for high-quality public services. That bargain is fraying. Hospitals are overwhelmed, rural areas lack doctors, emergency rooms face extreme delays, schools struggle with staffing shortages and declining performance, courts move slowly, infrastructure ages. Those with money increasingly opt out. Private schools, private clinics, private security. The system still promises equality, but in practice, access depends more and more on income. What remains is a divided society, those insulated from decline and those exposed to it daily. A national mood problem. Economic challenges are one thing, collective psychology is another. Despite generous vacations, strong cultural assets, and a high standard of living by global standards, pessimism runs deep. Surveys repeatedly show French citizens among the most negative about the future. The reason lies in expectations. France teaches its history as one of central importance: empire, revolution, enlightenment, global influence. When current reality doesn't match that narrative, disappointment turns inward. Fear of decline discourages spending, risk-taking, and entrepreneurship. Failure carries social stigma. Optimism feels naive. Over time, pessimism becomes self-reinforcing. A preview, not an exception. France is not unique. It is early. An aging population, deindustrialization, rising debt, political fragmentation. These patterns appear across much of the developed world. France simply reached the crossroads first. What happens there offers a glimpse of what others may face. If confidence breaks, if borrowing costs spike, or if reforms remain stalled, the consequences won't stay contained within one country. France is less a cautionary tale than a warning flare. Final thoughts. France is not finished. It has survived far worse moments in history. There is resilience, creativity, and a new generation pushing against old assumptions. Innovation hubs are growing. Some reforms are underway. But the constraints are real. Debt, demographics, and stagnant incentives don't disappear through rhetoric. For outsiders, the lesson is simple. Don't judge a country by its aesthetics. Look at its balance sheet. Look at its incentives. Look at whether effort still pays off. The French experience isn't just about France. It's a mirror held up to much of the developed world. And whether that reflection becomes a warning or a roadmap depends on what happens next.